Good evening and welcome. Councilmember Toby Gilley has our prayer and pledge this evening. Mr. Gilley.
Thank you, Mayor. If you would bow your heads, please. Dear God, our most loving Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this wonderful day that you've given us in this wonderful city in which we live. Dear Father, we thank you for everyone who is here tonight, and we ask your blessings upon them. As we make decisions for this city tonight, give us a measure of your wisdom so that we do what's right for our community as a whole. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball.
Good evening and welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council meeting, November 19th, 2009. We have a number of guests with us this evening. We're glad to see all of you and hope you're in a good mood and ready to help us conduct the city's business, and we appreciate your attendance. One of the things I'd like to do, I'll need to get down to the podium, so Vice Mayor, if you would take the chair for a minute, I would appreciate that.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Take it to the next room.
It's my pleasure, Council, and folks who are visiting with us tonight, to introduce to you the band director for Segal High School, Randy Roadie. Randy, would you please join me up here at the podium just for a minute, please? Randy has got an outstanding high school band. He's building a great reputation there. I also found out in talking to him earlier this evening that he was a member of the University of Tennessee Pride of the Southland Band, which I also played in the Pride of the Southland Band. He was there about 30 years after me, I think. But we're very pleased tonight to recognize the Segal High School Marching Band, who, among other things, they have won the Tennessee Governor's Cup and the Grand Champion designation at this year's MTSU Contest of Champions. This is the first time since 1971 that a Rutherford County band has achieved this distinction, and if I'm thinking right, Central High School's band was probably the 1971 band that won that. So I was an alumni of that band also, I might add. We can go into that later. But anyway, we have a number of guests with us tonight, including section leaders. I'm going to ask you, section leaders, if you'll stand as I call your name out. Nancy Kelly, Molly Waxman, Jacqueline Quarles, Jessica Bowles, Rob Tez Blackman, James Sartain, Megan Tidrick, Serena Roadie, Neely Pistoli, Emily O'Gwen, Lee Huang, Allison Todd, Daniel Murphy, Christian Maddox, John Caldwell, James Ray, Graham Hutchison, Robert Jermick, George Lynch, Christina Wilbert, Jessica Kendrick, Emily Crutcher, Leslie Kuntapanya. I may have missed somebody. If I've missed somebody, if you'll stand up too. And I think we've got parents and band boosters with us, so if y'all would all stand up, please. Mr. Medford, our other band director. And Mr. Medford and his wife are here, who is the other band director. So why don't you come up here too? And I've got a proclamation on behalf of the council, which is going to recognize this as a day to enjoy and give Thanksgiving for this tremendous effort this band, these members, and these parents have made during the year. So this is a proclamation on behalf of our City Council to proclaim today, November 19th, as a day to recognize Segal High School Band for its contributions to musical education in Murfreesboro and Rutherford County, and for representing our community so well because of their dedication and commitment to excellence. Thank you so very much. Congratulations. Thank you. You may rise.
Thank you very much. Thank you. we have a very hard-working group of students. They're very dedicated. They're committed to excellence, and their work shows. They're, every day when they come to practice, they're ready to roll up their sleeves and work really hard. We have a very committed principal, Mr. Ken Nolan, to all the programs at Segal High School. He does a great job, and all of our staff guys. Mr. Medford, our other band director, is also here, and we work side by side diligently together. I'd like to recognize Mr. Medford. Would you like to say something?
Yes, I'd like to thank Mr. Jerry Steinhilber for all of his work with our percussion section this year. He did a really great job. Miss Annette Roadie works with our color guard, does a really outstanding job with that group. And I'd just like to say thank you to all the kids for working so hard. You guys just really put it out there this year, and you truly are champions. So thank you very much.
All right. We certainly appreciate all of you turning out and being here, and certainly the excellence that you provided, and we all enjoy the halftime shows and everything that goes on, so thank you very much for your hard work. I've got a little program that the city is trying to make sure that everyone is aware of, and it's called the National League of Cities, or the Discount Drug Card Program, that the city of Murfreesboro is sponsoring. And this is a discount card program that kiosks are located in our city hall and some of our other public buildings, and you could save up to 20% on your prescription drug costs. Now, the council members and no city employees or staff or anybody else gets anything from this. This is just a program that we're trying to offer that the National League of Cities has suggested, and I think it's a good program and probably a cost-effective way to help some of our citizens save money, obviously on their prescription drugs. So if you need some information on this, you can call the city at 849-2629, or you can pick up some information at these little kiosks. But we hope you would take advantage of that if it's worthwhile for you. Also, I wanted to remind everyone that we will do tree planting and general cleanup on our greenway, and that begins tomorrow. Along that section that was really damaged by the Good Friday tornadoes on the Thompson Lane trailhead. The show up at the trailhead, but we'd like for you, if you will, to call and perhaps get some times that are available when we need folks, because we have a number of people who have already signed up. But the sign-up times are 9 a.m. to noon on tomorrow, or Friday, 9 a.m. to noon, or Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon, or from 1 to 4. So any of those times would be good for you. We're going to be digging some holes and doing some general cleanup. We'll have all the equipment there, but you might want to bring a shovel and some gardening tools to help us when you do that. You might, let me get you a phone number here. I believe I've got one. 893-2141 to schedule a time if you would like to help us in replanting along the Thompson Lane trailhead, which was damaged again by the Good Friday tornadoes. I might mention, too, that our treasurer and personnel director for the city, Sue Mahon, has announced that she will be retiring, and obviously we will miss her. She's been our city treasurer and personnel director for the past 2 years and has probably worked about 5 years worth of time in those 2 years. So, Sue, we certainly wish you well in your retirement. And I believe that's all I've got right now. And so, council members, before you, you have your consent agenda. If you've had an opportunity to take a look at that consent agenda, are there any questions? Or are you ready for a motion?
Mayor, with no questions, I move for approval of consent agenda.
Second.
All right, you have a motion. Second. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You also have the minutes of our regular meeting held on November the 5th, 2009. If you've had an opportunity to review those minutes, are there any additions or deletions? Are you ready for a
Mayor,
vote?
hearing none, I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland. Mr. Washington. Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on October the 22nd, 2009, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider annexation of approximately 12.64 acres located north of Wilkinson Pike and west of West Park Drive, and to adopt for the same a plan of services. Our planning staff for the City of Murfreesboro is the applicant. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 1st, 2009 issue of the local newspaper. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. The item before you, the first public hearing for tonight is to consider annexation of 9 parcels of property located north of Wilkinson Pike and west of West Park Drive. Initially, the Planning Commission studied 20 parcels located south of Highland Park Drive and then west of West Park Drive and north of Wilkinson Pike. But the recommendation before you today is to annex the 12.64 acres shown in blue on the map before you. The subject area consists of 9 parcels, which before the April 10th tornado had 8 houses on them. Currently, there are 4 structures on those 9 parcels, one of which I know has gotten a permit to rebuild. These properties are within the City of Murfreesboro's urban growth boundary, and they're contiguous with current city limits. No right-of-way is included in this study because the right-of-way of Wilkinson Pike is already within Murfreesboro city limits. The city will be able to provide services to the study area if you do decide to annex it. The properties are in CUD's district, so CUD will provide water. Currently, the water lines along Wilkinson Pike do not provide the proper fire flow that the City of Murfreesboro Fire Department prefers, but when the Wilkinson Pike is rebuilt, it will be rebuilt at the minimum standards the City of Murfreesboro requires. As I just alluded to, Wilkinson Pike will be rebuilt. It's currently been designed, and we're estimating that right-of-way will begin to be acquired in the beginning of next year, 2010. The road will be a 3-lane road with curbs and gutters and sidewalks. The Planning Commission did recommend that you annex the 9 parcels and adopt the plan of services for those properties. If you have any questions either before or after the public hearing, I'll be glad to answer them. I would like to clarify that this public hearing is for the annexation of those 9 parcels located north of Wilkinson Pike.
Any questions from Ms. Ely before we open the public hearing? Do you recall the vote in the Planning Commission on the annexation request?
It was unanimous.
Any questions? If there are no questions, then I'll open the public hearing at this time, and anyone wishing to speak for or against this annexation of approximately 12.64 acres located north of Wilkinson Pike and west of West Park Drive, please step to the podium and give us your name and address, please. Anyone wishing to speak? Don't be bashful.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Whitney Woodford. I live at 2633 Cross Park Drive. I have lived at this house my whole life, and recently, ever since Blackman School was built, we have had nothing but construction in our area, and I'm personally tired of it. After the tornadoes, I felt like our neighborhood has been invaded. There's been so much construction, and it's still not done. I don't see how building on this property will do our neighborhood any good. So please don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Council.
Hello.
My name is Miles Cumberbatch. I used to live at 2824 Wilkinson Pike, and I'm also speaking for my father, who used to live at 2814 Wilkinson Pike. We are the second to the last and third to the last on this side.
On the right side? You're
Yeah,
closer to West Park?
a little below the Arrows's area.
All right.
That's mine and my parents are next door. A couple things I need to. At first, I don't think it would be good for the city to take it, to annex it. One, because it's empty lots. Two of the houses that are on it, there's a yellow house and another structure, which is at 2834 and 28, the next two over for my parents. Those houses are both still under well, they're still working with their insurance companies. So I realize that both the occupants have gotten several letters from the cities about cleaning up the areas, and they've worked on it, but they've also had problems with break-ins and things like that. Beyond that, as far as the rebuilding, it's land. Personally, for me, my front doorstep is now going to be the Chamber of Commerce, 3 stories. That will cover my view of the hotel. Take it up, and I'll get 100 parking spots and 2 bus spots. All that traffic's coming down Wilkinson Pike. So I want to reserve the right to rebuild. It's still my land, but at the moment, I'm not planning to rebuild there. Now, as far as the only other question I have is, I'd like you guys to review and answer, if you could, for me. If you do go ahead and annex it, is all those properties going to be grandfathered in as far as what they are now? Because after the tornado, county rules, we didn't have to pull up driveways, we didn't have to pull up tree stumps, we didn't have to reseed like some of the people in the city had to do. Now, granted, hasn't quite been 7 months since the tornado. So basically, if you guys annex it and you enforce city rules, then you're telling us that you're going to give us another fee to pay on top of most likely our increased taxes. So I'd like you to look at as far as the annexation goes, look at the grandfathering of property as is. And the second thing is, the very last lot there's no house can be built there until they get sewers. The very last lot is a hole about 4 feet below the road, and that's where all the water goes. So if the city takes that on, you might be somewhat responsible for the water. Now, granted, I guess when a sewer comes in, it could be the 4 or 5 feet can be added and it could be built on, but as of now, it's substandard to be built on. And I guess that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Pat Boland. I live at 2512 West Park Drive. My concern is that you're going to have a neighborhood that is going to be partly county and partly city. As of yet, we have not heard any plans to annex the rest of the subdivision. That is a major concern of the people in the neighborhood. Everyone that I talked to and discussed with said, hey, you're dividing the neighborhood. You're taking a small section of it, you're making it city, you're leaving the rest county. That is a major concern of the people in the neighborhood. One other thing is that we do want to highly stress the drainage and the flooding. The point that he brought about the corner lot at Wilkinson Pike and West Park Drive, it acts as a natural retaining pool for this neighborhood. On the back side of that property is a large drainage ditch, and the water from a lot of the neighborhood drains down through that drainage ditch under the road and through our property and the Barnes' property. The whole area, because we are the lowest area in the neighborhood, has a tendency to flood. So we have, through all of this, we have not heard any plans for drainage, for flooding, and I know that's going to be gotten in. This is just the annexation, but having to do with these properties is that the point I brought before we don't like having the neighborhood split. That part is county now, as part is city, and the drainage is an issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Harold Helm, and I live at 2781 Highland Park Drive, and that's the lot right above the big sign that says area, the white lot. I have 4 concerns, and I do want to give a copy of this. I wrote it down, and I've took some pictures, and I want to turn this, and I don't know who to turn it into, but right this is it's close to what I'm saying anyway. I'm going to cover my 4 concerns, and I know we've got a rezoning later, and I'm not going to get up at that public hearing. I'm going to cover all of them real quick right here. I have 4 concerns. One of them is the building height that is in the future, the annexation of the 9 lots, a buffer zone, and the drainage. I saw a TV spot come out yesterday, and it was said that the buildings are not going to be higher than 35 feet. Now, I would like to know where you're talking about. Is it north of Medical Center or south of Wilkinson? Because there's 2 roads there, and I want to know, basically, when you say 35 foot, I want to know where those buildings would be and then where taller buildings would be. The annexation of 9 lots north of Wilkinson Pike. Once you annex, what is next? People were going to rebuild, but now what will happen? Will the city take possession of these lots eventually? The back of our yard and neighborhoods and our neighbors' yards now will border city. And I'd like to know what happened to piecemeal annexation, because that's what that is. The buffer zone. Will there be any buffer along south side of Wilkinson Pike, and where? And my main concern is the drainage. It is stated that it will improve drainage from the street. Yes, you are installing culverts, and there's pictures there, and all are dumping water into a ditch that goes nowhere. There's a 400-foot ditch that borders the lot that says area. It borders it's on the Wilkinson farm, and that ditch borders, and it ends at the corner of my lot and dumps all the water onto the Wilkinson farm. There's no basin, there's no drainage ditch or anything. It floods that farm every time it rains more than 1.5 inches. If it rains 4 inches, it goes into my backyard. When I first came to Murfreesboro 21 years ago, I met with the city engineer at that time, or the county engineer, and they brought 58 double tandem loads of dirt and put in my backyard because of the flooding that was there. And that improved it a lot. And it took care of it for a long time. But now, with all these culverts and all this area up here that's draining strictly to that area, and it's draining and kicking water down that ditch, and all that ditch has to do, that 400-foot ditch has to get stopped up, and it'll dump all that rain right in my backyard. And both ends of our subdivision are subject to drainage. I mean, and I just like to know what your plans are of getting the water to the river instead of the farm and the yards. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, and thanks for giving us these pictures and your making the copy of your concerns.
Good evening. My name is Brian Fritcher. I live at 2672 Cross Park Drive. In regards to the annexation of these 9 parcels, my question is to the council, what about the other part of Wilkinson Pike if there was a fire at one of the houses? Is somebody going to sit and say, that's the city, that's the county, and nobody show up? I think that the Planning Commission should have looked a little bit further down. If they're concerned about protecting what is built back, that is on the back side of the Chamber of Commerce / Visitor Center, is there communication with 8 of those parcels as to what kind of restrictions would they have to comply with once it's annexed in the city? Are they going to be in a gateway development overlay that will restrict a type of house that they would like to build back? Will they have to have side load garages? Or is the intent to get it annexed with a near future looking at changing it to possibly commercial or office general? As a resident, I think there's information that we are missing, and I hope that we have all the information that y'all have that's being presented. These are fellow neighbors, and I think they're in kind of limbo whether or not they want to or can build back, and I would like to know if there's information that's getting back to them. I'm not one of the owners, so you may be in conversation with them saying, if it is annexed, here's your guidelines. That's the only thing I have to say on the annexation. I would like to see us look possibly, if you're going to annex, to go ahead and stretch down to the battleground, at least both sides of Wilkinson Pike. There's not any confusion for services, emergency respondents. To me, it looks like a little bit of a piecemeal just to get a little bit to beautify for the Chamber of Commerce. It is going to be the major gateway. People are going to come to the visitor center to get information and then go down to the new entrance into the battleground. Please just study it further before a decision is made. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name's Kevin Lindsay. I live at 2595 West Park Drive, quite a ways away from these 9 lots. But I just want to say that I agree with everything that's been said, all the different concerns, especially the drainage as far down West Park as I live, which is the next to last lot on the left just before Crosswoods. We still have water drainage problems there, even with significant rain. So, but all these are concerns, especially, you know, kind of splitting up the subdivision, city, county. So,
thank you. Others interested in speaking? For or against?
My name is David. I live at 2626 Cross Park Drive.
What's the last name?
David Glass.
Glass, thank you.
And I wasn't really even going to speak about this particular annexation, but I did want to say one thing regarding it. It seems to me that if the intent of the planning department is to eventually take this piece of property over and do something else with it, to me, you know, this neighborhood has been beat down. This community and the city did a wonderful job in coming and helping protect that area after the tornadoes and everything that we've dealt with. If this takes place, it seems to me that after all that protection, now they're taking advantage of the situation, because all those houses are not on there now, and if they decide to take the property, no doubt it would be at a cheaper price. And that just seems like that those people who own those properties shouldn't be taken advantage of if that is the intent of the planning department.
Anyone else?
I'm Stuart Johnson. I'm the superintendent at Stones River National Battlefield, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you this evening. My primary concern, or the concern of the National Park Service in regard to this particular issue, is while it's my understanding that if these properties were annexed into the city, they would retain a residential zoning classification for the present. But I do have a concern that because the property across Wilkinson Pike will ultimately be developed in a commercial fashion, that this will put pressure on these properties to be rezoned for some sort of commercial classification, bringing the possibility of commercial construction ever closer to the battlefield. If you have been back in this area, back on Cross Park Drive, and look back towards the battlefield, you'll know that that area was terribly devastated by the tornado. Whereas before the tornado, people who used our trail system really were not able to look up and see this area. Now it is completely open. It'll be years before it's reforested. And we just have a concern that of the possibility 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, really doesn't matter, of commercial development ever closer to the battlefield. So that is our concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last chance. If there is no one else, I'm going to close the public hearing at this time, and we will consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to annex an area located north of Wilkinson Pike and west of West Park Drive. Questions from the council?
Mayor, in listening to what our audience has said tonight, if I understood what they're saying correctly, and maybe we're all misunderstanding this, it seems like that there's some people that think the city's going to take their property. All we're doing is annexing it to the city. The ownership stays with the ownership now. There'll be no changing of hands of property unless someone wants to sell their property. So the city's not going to take their property in any way, form, or fashion. This is a rezoning matter. Is that correct, Ms. Gannon? Am I?
Not a zoning.
Annexation.
And I mean, it's not a zoning matter, it's an annexation matter.
Yes, sir, but no taking is involved and no voluntary sales to the city are contemplated.
And in my history working with the city, we very, very seldom buy property. I mean, very seldom buy property. It's usually for a road. And in this particular case, the right-of-way is already there. So there will be no taking of property even for the road construction, if I understand it correctly.
I don't know what might be required for the road.
If it is, it's minor.
It's
real minor. It's 4 feet, 2 feet, something like that. But I picked up that there's people that think that the city's going to take this property, and I want to nix that very quickly.
Yes, and certainly, anytime there's a taking, the value would be totally independent of the insurance condition or the damage condition to the property. It would not be a question of trying to buy it when it was distressed.
So the residences that live there now, if they choose to sell or they choose to build back, this annexation is really going to have no bearing on that?
The only impact it would have if they rebuild, it would be rebuilding to city standards. Since the county and the city have the same building code for 1- and 2-story homes, it's enforced and applied by different inspectors, but they have the same standards. I don't believe it would have an impact on them. Now, the city has certain rules about, no sofas in the front yard. For example, I don't think the county has a similar standard, but there would be some minor differences in city ordinances that would be applicable, but there would not be a difference in building standards because we use the same one.
So the residents could either build back as they chose, or they could sell if they chose, or hold the property for whatever reason they wanted to.
Yes,
And the city really wouldn't have any position on that.
correct.
Thank you.
Can maybe, Mayor, if I may,
Vice Mayor.
maybe Mr. Alott, or if he's here, someone else that come up, there are some concerns about, I know one gentleman asked about grandfathering. I don't think we typically, you might want to address that, Ms. McGannon, since that's probably a legal question, but.
I'd be glad to. Uses that are lawful in the county now on that property would continue to be lawful when it came in. If there's an existing use now and it comes into the city, it would be a lawful use. It may or may not be nonconforming. I've heard nothing to suggest it would be nonconforming. But even if it were nonconforming with city standards, it would be grandfathered in terms of its existing uses.
For how long?
Indefinitely,
For
permanently.
that owner?
Regardless, if there's a home there now that's lawful, or even that's existing now, and they sold it to somebody else, it would still be lawful. They sell it to somebody else, it would still be lawful. Existing uses would continue to be lawful. They would be grandfathered in without regard to the annexation. The issue might make a difference if there were to be, at some point in the future, a zoning change and someone wanted to stop having that building being used for residential purposes, or they wanted to take that building down. That's when the grandfathering issue would come into play as to whether they had the right to do that or not. But the people who are using it as residences now, or who were using it and want to rebuild, would have every right to do that. This would not impact their rights in that regard.
But as far as grandfather, the difference in the ordinances or codes, or difference in the building standards, as far as whatever may be the difference between the city and the county, if the county has a certain set of standards and ours is different, would that be grandfathered?
If the property is vacant now because the home was destroyed and removed, it becomes annexed into the city as vacant property, and then they wish to rebuild. They would be rebuilding to city standards.
Right.
They would not be grandfathered into the county
Right.
standards because there wasn't an existing building.
Correct. Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. And there's some talk, maybe Mr. Alott or somebody may or may want to talk about drainage. I know there was a lot of comments from different ones about drainage and even the building height. I think needs some clarification on that.
Mr. Alott, there were several questions there, and you may
I tried to write
go ahead and put those in the form of answers that you have currently, and if there's other things that we want to ask, we may get to you in a little bit.
All right. One of the big questions, and I think that the residents find themselves wondering about, is the drainage. Certainly, Rutherford County has its share of drainage problems. The city of Murfreesboro is part of Rutherford County. We have the same basic drainage systems. This area does drain into sinkholes. There is a drainage area on the lot on the east end, right there at the intersection with West Park Drive. We're very much aware of it, and part of the subdivision drains into it. Also on the other side of West Park Drive, and that property drains ultimately towards the battlefield and into a drainage way that extends ultimately towards Stones River. I've looked at that drainage system. It's got its share of problems. We've been very careful with the property on the south side of Wilkinson Drive. That would be the Gatton property, formerly the Lane property, where they've been doing the excavation to see that they have a very large detention and retention area constructed. We're hopeful. What we're trying to do is trying to keep water from the south side from going into this subdivision. With the new road that we're going to construct, we'll be constructing a drainage system in that road. It will have storm drains with drain inlets, and it will be a better system than these ditches that seem to have silted up and become a little bit of a problem over time. Our city engineer is very much aware of the reports. He's been hearing them. He's been investigating. He's been looking at them for some time. When we had the neighborhood meeting, he became aware of some of the problems. So I'm confident that what we will be doing with the road construction is to minimize the drainage impact into the subdivision. I'll have to defer to him on the specifics of what the design will be. One of the things that I look ahead to is the future development plans. our stormwater regulations require that we detain water on site now, particularly for sites that have more than 10,000 square feet of impervious area, and that's just written into the rules. The way that we manage drainage is much greater. Is much more demanding than it was just a couple of years ago. The stormwater regulations that we've adopted is changing our drainage culture, if you will, the way we anticipate it to be managed and the way that we require it to be designed. So new development in this area, whether it be commercial or residential, will have to observe those regulations. Now, another thing I hear is this issue about piecemeal annexation and dividing the neighborhood. Well, in large parts, we're all Rutherford County. We all are Rutherford County. Part of our county is also Murfreesboro, and that's a corporate boundary where we extend the services that the city provides. These lots front directly upon Wilkinson Pike, and these lots will front directly upon a city street. That part of Wilkinson Pike is in the city. It will be easy. What has motivated this annexation is that when we began to study the zoning application for the property to the south, during the Planning Commission meeting, I brought up, and I will say I, as the city's planning director, I sort of have a responsibility to bring these type of planning issues up. The fact that our office, the planning department, has received inquiries about possible annexation of those properties for commercial uses. Now, my concern is at this point not whether or not it's commercial per se. It is to what standard will it be developed. If we're going to see property on the north side of Wilkinson Pike redeveloped as a result of the recovery from the April 10th tornado, I'm very much concerned of the quality and the nature that it will have. If it's going to be residential, single family, I'm not very much concerned about it. But when my office receives inquiries for possible commercial zoning for that property, I'm a little bit concerned. I feel it's time that the city gets ahead of what's coming at us. And I can observe areas on the fringe of the city where the commercialization has taken place. In an area that I think that the Planning Commission discussed was the area along Highway 96 across from the Franklin Road Baptist Church, where there are a series of single-family homes that have sprouted these large commercial signs, and they're right on the edge of the city. And I'm very much concerned of that type of development taking place immediately adjacent to the Gateway area and the city's new visitor center. The visitor center is going to be a very wonderful amenity in our community, and it's going to be experienced by many people. And I felt that it was time that the city's planning commission studied what might be taking place and prepare a recommendation to council. The Planning Commission felt that we should annex this area, in part to be able to have some control over it, so that the future inquiries about zoning will come through the city, so that we can coordinate that. The city's Planning Commission has no particular desire to see this property commercialized. They made it very clear. What we want to avoid is the piecemeal approach and the substandard approach. So the Planning Commission felt, let's annex it, and we're going to also see a little bit about what takes place over the next 6 months. In fact, at yesterday's Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission really deferred action on any changes to the Wilkinson Pike buffer to let the property owners determine if they're going to rebuild. If in the next 4 or 5 months they begin to rebuild, well, we'll probably want to leave that Wilkinson Pike buffer just like it is, no change. If they don't rebuild and they begin to market their property very actively for non-residential purposes, then the Planning Commission may take a different look. But we're going to just table that until the middle of March. We're going to return to it and see where we are then. We may table it again. We may undertake it for a change. But the Planning Commission has no particular desire to see that property commercialized. What we do want to make sure is that whatever happens does not adversely impact the rest of the Gateway and the Chambers Visitor Center. The height, we're going to talk more about that during zoning, and Ms. Ely is going to go over that real carefully. But the area that's that's zoned office general, and we're going to talk about that more when Ms. Ely presents on the zoning, will have a maximum height of 35 foot. And it will remain in the GDO 2, which has a maximum height of 35 foot. The part that's going to be rezoned to commercial highway, and she's going to go over that in detail with a different map, will have a maximum height of 75 foot, but that will be clear in the map. But it does not, none of it fronts on the Wilkinson Pike. It will all be at least on the west side, at least 230 foot from Wilkinson Pike, and on the east side, at least 500 foot from Wilkinson Pike. Some of these items have already been taken care of. Something else I want to point out about the single-family homes that Mr. Ham kind of alluded to, something that the city may have no control over, may be the subdivision restrictions that may be in place on those lots. I don't know what they are. I have an expectation that there may be some. That may regulate whether it's a front entry garage, a side entry garage, or such, the building materials that may be used. It's my impression that there may be restrictive covenants on those lots. I don't know what they are. Someone who owns the property should really look at them before they rebuild, because they may find a problem. Is there anything that I or Ms. McGann has not already covered? If there are, I'll be glad to address them.
Fire service, we would provide to those lots.
Our fire department provides fire service to property inside the city of Murfreesboro. Now, in some cases, we have a cooperative arrangement outside the city, but really, our taxpayers pay for the program. They're entitled to the program. And that area that's not inside the city is not really entitled to that service. Now, Mr. Lyons, I'd say he may have a comment to make on that regard.
I was just going to add that the 911 system does code properties as to whether or not they're in the Murfreesboro response area or outside of the city. So should a 911 call be made, the emergency responders would clearly know that it was a city address to be responded to by Murfreesboro Police or Murfreesboro Fire.
I'm not aware of any letters that the city had sent to property owners along that stretch of road within those lots to clean up or anything. Those are obviously not currently in the city, so we don't have any jurisdiction. I think all of us did during the tornado work together. We tried to provide services across the community, whether they were in the county or in the city, to do everything that we could do. And I want to congratulate this neighborhood for the work that they did in getting back on their feet. I know many of you were affected. Your friends and your neighbors were affected. So, Mr. Johnson, Superintendent, obviously we know the damage that was done to the battlefield. So I wish there were a way to go back and undo that storm, but it certainly took its toll, and I know all of us are still suffering probably a little bit of what I might call the hangover from that storm. It was a tough time for all of us. Are there any other questions? I do want to recognize State Senator Bill Ketron, who has joined us this evening, and I appreciate you being with us. Senator, you're a friend of the county and take good care of us in many ways. Thank you very much for being with us. Any other questions before we consider this annexation ordinance on first reading?
I'll make a comment if I could. I just want to make a comment that Mr. Adlock brought up a good point that that has happened, to the city. I know probably a lot of the residents have probably seen what he had mentioned on Highway 96, an area that is kind of in the middle of being annexed by the city. And what happens is they start converting those single-family homes to commercial business for whatever reason. I think it's really not appropriate. It doesn't look good. You have bad planning and it's really it hurts the neighborhood around it instead of bringing it up. And I think this was a way that we can protect the neighborhood that's behind it. I have no desire to ever see that property commercial. I have no desire to see it anything but residential. But in order to protect the neighbors that are behind that from those who live on the front from redeveloping or selling or converting property over to property that's be something other than residential, under the county standards, would be something that I don't think that would benefit, certainly not the neighbors that are around it. And I think this would be a way to help protect that, in my mind.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I hope we have answered the questions that were brought to our attention, plus maybe some others that were on your mind during this discussion. At this time, we do have, for first reading, this ordinance. If there are other questions or comments, now is a good time, or if you're ready for a motion one way or the other on this ordinance, I certainly would accept that.
On Wilkinson Pike, we said 2010 we're looking at right-of-way acquisition to start the project.
So that project's being designed right now, would be in the next round of the capital improvement plan, but we're projecting that project to start in 2010.
I think if you look at this property and you look at what's happened out along Medical Center Parkway, you know, we really had a blank slate there. We really didn't have, in that undeveloped property, a lot of residential that we were dealing with. The thing that you're dealing with this property, it directly backs up to residential property, and as a property owner, I absolutely would be concerned with what's going on in my backyard. At the same time, if I lived in that neighborhood, I also would be concerned or also feel a little better to know that the city's protections, just through zoning ordinances, and this is nothing against the county's ordinances, we're just designed to be more restrictive on what can go on in your backyard. I'm like Councilman Bratcher. When I sat on the Planning Commission, and anytime Wilkinson Pike was brought up, it was a discussion that on the north side of Wilkinson Pike that was not a suitable area for commercial development because it was so close to the battlefield. So, you know, things have changed on the south side of Wilkinson Pike with the development that we have along the avenue. I know we have east going back towards Thompson Lane. We have a lot of undeveloped property that's in that section. So my concern would be making sure that whatever happens, we protect that the north side of Wilkinson Pike as that property begins to develop, because the further you go back that direction, you're getting closer to the battlefield. So I don't necessarily have a problem with annexation, with the understanding that it's going to be, my opinion, to protect those property owners. Although they're county residents, we're all part of the county, and they back up to a city parcel or residents in the city. So, under my understanding, we'll protect them just like we would a resident of the city. So,
are you ready for a motion?
I make a motion we approve the request, the annexation of this area.
On first reading. Mm-hmm. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion and second that we approve this annexation ordinance on first reading. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on October 22, 2009, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning approximately .25 acres along Greenland Drive and Old Lascassas Road from residential multifamily 16 RM16 district to the local commercial CL district. Pradeep Agnihotri is the applicant. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 1, 2009 issue of the local newspaper. Welcome again, Ms. Ely.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. This public hearing is to consider rezoning approximately quarter-acre parcel that's located along the western side of Old Lascassas Road and just north of Greenland Drive. The property is currently zoned RM16, as are the properties to the north of the subject area. It used to have a single-family house on it, but now it's a vacant parcel since that house has been removed. The properties to the south along Greenland Drive are zoned CL, local commercial district. On the corner of Old Las Casas Road and Greenland Drive is a convenience market. And on the corner of Gunnarsson Avenue and Greenland Drive is a bookstore. Just across Greenland Drive is Middle Tennessee State University, which is Zone CU for college purposes. The property owner has requested that you consider rezoning his property to CL, local commercial district, because he intends, or he has stated that his intention is to combine it with some property he already owns to the south, the L-shaped parcel that is currently Zone CL. That way, both parcels would have one zone on it. The CL zone would allow the current uses that are permitted in the RM16 zone, which are residential uses, but will also allow limited commercial uses that you see along Greenland Drive. Mr. Agnihotri is here this evening. He does not have a presentation, but he will be glad to answer any questions you may have about this request. The Planning Commission did unanimously recommend that this be rezoned from RM16 to CL. If you have any questions, either before or after the public hearing, staff will be glad to answer them for you.
Any questions for Ms. Ely? Any questions before I open the public hearing? If not, I'll open the public hearing at this time, and anyone wishing to speak for or against this zoning request for approximately 0.25 acres rezoned from RM16 to CL located along Greenland Drive and Old Las Casas Road, please step to the microphone. Is anyone here wishing to speak? Anyone at all? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to rezone an area located along Greenland Drive and Old Las Casas Road.
Move for passage.
Second.
You have a motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gelly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on October 22, 2009, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning an area along Gresham Park Drive south of Wilkinson Pike as follows. Approximately 10.3 acres from General Office OG District to Highway Commercial CH District. Approximately 5.5 acres from Single Family Residential 15 RS15 District to Office General OG District. Approximately 2.95 acres from Gateway District Overlay GDO 2 District to a Gateway Design Overlay 1 GDO 1 District, and to remove approximately 11.62 acres from the Battlefield Protection BPD District. Mr. Tommy Smith, on behalf of Mr. C.M. Gatton, is the applicant. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 1, 2009 issue of the local newspaper. Ms. Ely.
Thank you again. This request is to rezone one parcel from its current zones, as you mentioned. The parcel is bisected by Gresham Park Drive. It looks like several parcels because of the multiple zones on the one parcel, but actually it's just one parcel. So when I describe them, I want you to be aware of that. This property is located south of Wilkinson Pike. The properties to the north are the properties that were just considered for annexation and were recommended for annexation. Currently, they're in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County and zoned R15 for residential purposes. The properties to the south are zoned CH, Highway Commercial District, and is location of the city's Avenue Shopping Center and the Convention Center. The property owner came to us with a request to rezone the property CH. The Planning Commission's recommendation was that different from what the property owners requested, so I want to go through what the Planning Commission has unanimously recommended. First is that the area zoned RS15 for single-family residential purposes be rezoned from RS15 to OG, General Office District. The Planning Commission recommended that this property, identified in blue on this map, remain in its GDO2 overlay district, which does limit height to 35 feet. So that hasn't changed, just the base zoning. The Planning Commission is also recommending that the property in orange on the map before you, currently zoned OG, located along Medical Center Parkway, be rezoned from OG to CH, Highway Commercial District. That property will remain in its overlay district as well. And I think the next map will show the next parts of the request, if Ms. Logan will put them up. the parcel that's currently zoned CH, Highway Commercial District, is in GDO 1 and GDO 2 overlay districts. The Planning Commission has recommended that this small area be rezoned from GDO 2 to GDO 1 to be consistent with the properties that are currently along Medical Center Parkway. The properties that are just south of Wilkinson Pike will remain in the GDO 2 district with that height limitation of 35 feet, but the properties that will be along Medical Center Parkway that will be in GDO 1 will have a maximum height of 75 feet. The vote was unanimous to recommend these approvals. If you have questions about the request, I'll be glad to answer them before or after the public hearing, and Mr. Alott will be prepared to answer any questions you may have as well. And if you'd like me to put any of the other maps back up, then we'll be glad to do that.
Any questions, Mr. Young?
Ms. Ely, the original request for the blue area was to be commercial highway. Is that correct?
Right. The original request to be CH, and the Planning Commission felt that it was more appropriate to have the general office district be located along Wilkinson Pike, and the general office district doesn't allow as many uses that you would see in the highway commercial district. Typically the types of uses that you see along Old Fort Parkway and, of course, the section of Medical Center Parkway, that's what's allowed in CH zone. But OG districts are just defined to office buildings and office types uses. I did want to mention, too, that the Planning Commission recommended that the 500 feet from Wilkinson Pike south is in the Battlefield Protection Overlay District. Planning Commission recommended removing that overlay district from the property because the Battlefield Protection District is very similar to the GDO 2 district, and so since the GDO 2 district will remain on those properties, will restrict those heights to 35 feet, they didn't think that the redundancy was necessary, so that's also another request.
One more question, please. What is the height limit on the commercial, or the OG zone?
The OG zone is maximum of 35 feet.
Okay. All right, one more question, Mayor. The BP overlay, the battlefield protection versus the GDO, which one is more stringent?
The GDO 2 has more restrictions than a battlefield protection district, and the height limitations in the GDO 2 and the battlefield protection are the same, 35 feet.
Thank you.
Do we have other properties that have multiple overlays?
That's correct.
Well, if you, I guess, look at the map, the hatched properties show what's zone GDO 2. This heavy black line shows the boundary of the Battlefield Protection District. The speckled properties are GDO 1. So if you travel further down Medical Center Parkway, you'll see the shapes of the parcels, and you can see that the adjacent parcel is zones RS15, OG, it's in the GDO 2, it's in the GDO 1, and it's in the Battlefield Protection Overlay District as well. So I think that is the case as you travel further down Wilkinson Pike.
Mr. Gilley?
Segal, there was, at the Planning Commission, the night we had the public hearing, I realized what was requested was different from what came up a couple of weeks later with that. But can you show me on this map the difference in the property that was requested that the height restriction be raised in the initial request versus what's being suggested right now?
Initially, the property owner requested that we allow this entire parcel to have a maximum height of 75 feet. As it's zoned now, the portion that is, I think that's in the speckled area, it has a maximum height permitted of 75 feet, so the Planning Commission decided to not change that, to leave it as it is along Medical Center Parkway, although the property that's within 500 feet of Wilkinson Pike, they're also leaving that with the 35 feet height. I think I'm maybe jumbling my words. Initially, they wanted the entire property to have a maximum height of 75 feet, but the Planning Commission didn't feel comfortable with that, so they restricted that's closest to Wilkinson Pike to have a maximum height of 35 feet.
Can you tell me the difference in acreage between what was requested that the height be raised initially versus what's being
Sure.
sought right now?
Initially, the request was to rezone 12.96 acres from OG to CH, 5.54 acres from RS15 to CH, 11.62 acres from GDO 2 to GDO 1, and to remove the Battlefield Protection Overlay District. Also, the property owner requested to remove the Wilkinson Pike buffer. That request to remove the Wilkinson Pike buffer was considered as a separate item since it would be a text amendment. Planning Commission has decided to not take action on that, not remove that item from there. So now the acreage has changed to, let me get my agenda. .54 acres to OG, 2.95 acres to GDO1, and 10.3 acres to Highway Commercial District.
Okay, I think you're getting lost. The only specific acreage difference I want to know is the amount that was requested that it be allowed to go up to 75 feet at the initial request versus what's being recommended to go to 75 feet now. That one specific piece is what I'm asking right now.
So it'd be the entire parcel, which would be 12.96 plus 5.54 plus 11.62. So that would you're saying they originally they wanted everything to be able to go
right.
So that's 13, 18.
So what you see in blue,
yeah,
is what they requested to be 75 feet. And what you see outlined in pink was the only change that was granted to be 75 feet.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know the acreage.
And I think Mr. McFarland's calculations are right. Initially, it would have been 35 acres being requested to be the height restriction raised to 75 feet. Now it's 11 acres that's being recommended. Is our math right, Mr. Lyons? You're nodding your head.
Yeah, I think so. From the original request.
Right. That's the number that I was trying to get a grasp on. Thank you.
Is there a height restriction in the county?
Currently, the height restriction in the county for the properties across the street is 35 feet.
Other questions? Any other questions before I open the public hearing? If not, I'll open the public hearing at this time, and anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please step to the microphone. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Pat Boland. I live at 2512 West Park Drive. I do have a question. Is the Wilkinson Pike buffer on the left side of Gresham Park? It is on Wilkinson Pike. Is the Wilkinson Pike buffer still in place on that OG property?
We'll get you an answer, but
Okay.
if you just go ahead and give your comments, we'll add them all up, and then we'll try to get you answers.
During the zoning commission, when it was talking about the annexation of the property of the 9 lots, there was great concern about those lots going commercial at some time in the future. There was even discussion talked about moving the Wilkinson Pike buffer, which is a very protective buffer, to the back of those lots. So the people in the neighborhood are very concerned about the Wilkinson Pike buffer being taken out. In fact, we do have a petition who 59 residents have signed, and it says the residents of the neighborhoods adjacent to Wilkinson Pike request and petition that the Wilkinson Pike buffer not be removed in order to preserve the residential quality of the neighborhoods. So our concern, number one, is that if you set a precedent of taking out the protection for the battleground, that is going to extend all the way down Wilkinson Pike. That is one major concern that we have. Number two, in that area that's outlined in the pink, you can have a building that is 75 feet in height. Number one, that is not conducive to the battleground. And I had here something that I did want to read to you. Hold on just one moment. This is out of the ordinances. It says, "The intent and purpose of the Battlefield Protection District is to protect and preserve the ambient setting of the Stones River National Battleground and Cemetery, to promote a sensitivity of development towards the Stones River National Battleground and Cemetery, create an atmosphere in proximity to and along the streets and highways leading to the Stones River National Battleground and Cemetery, strengthen the economy, protect community resources, protect and enhance the city's attraction to tourists and visitors, and support and stimulus to business and industry thereby provided, and promote education and patriotic heritage of the present and the future." It goes on to say that they want to protect the neighborhoods, the citizens, while stimulating and growing the economy and producing. You have produced a lovely area in the avenue. That is not any question that we have. But what we have to say is that we are a neighborhood. We are residents. And we are fighting to protect the residential quality of our neighborhood. I have been in my home 23 years and 6 months. That's a long time. It's not just a house, it's my home. So when you go in and you start to remove this protection overlay, the battleground protection overlay, we feel that you are setting a precedent for the rest of Wilkinson Pike. We feel like it will detract from the battleground. We do not think that it is going to fulfill the intent and purpose that was set up in these guidelines. Now, with the petition that we are presenting tonight, that we do ask that you protect the neighborhood, that you protect the battlefield. In that GDO2, in the pink outline, you can have a building of 75 feet because you are taking it out. That is one of the major differences. They are requesting that the battleground protection plan be taken off of that pink area. When they do that, and that goes to GDO1, that area can be that building can be 75 feet in height. I don't know how deep that OG property is, but I would say at this point, in knowing the area, that that's probably about 100 feet. That means 100 feet from Wilkinson Pike, you can build a 75-foot building. If you come into our neighborhood in the evenings, you can see the Embassy Suite clearly. I mean clearly. When you step out on my front porch, it's very clear, a lot of light, and if you bring a 75-foot building, you're going to be able to see that clearly from the battleground in the park. Thank you.
If you'll give Mr. Lyons our petition, and thank you for gathering that. Others wishing to speak?
My name is Brian Pritchard. I live at 2672 Cross Park Drive. From the Planning Commission public hearing, I think we're making progress. I think the original applicant for marketability had proposed everything to be 75 feet. It's an easy sell if it's not diced up. I understand that. But right now, there are houses that's backed up to it. The card that is dealt for the developer is that we have to come up with something that is compatible and allows both the visitor center, the battleground, the neighborhood, and the commercial all to be at peace with one another. What I oppose tonight with the changes that have been made, and it's been really a lot to keep up with as to what has changed, what's not. I work during the day, so I'm not able to attend the other meetings that are available for me to attend. So trying to gather my thoughts and what is good, what's bad, what works, what doesn't. It's been kind of a hard thing to keep up with because there's been so many pieces to that one puzzle. My biggest objection tonight is to maintain the Battleground Protection District. Even though the GDO2 has more restrictive guidelines for design, once that Battlefield Protection District is stripped, you're really allowing the, as it was said, the encroachment on the battleground. It's almost at that fine point where it's far enough away from the battleground to not have that protection. But if you're in the backside of that Stones River battlefield, it really and truly, you can see those parcels very well. And a lot of it has been contributed to the tornado. And I'm not familiar with how the buffer falls into place. I know, as it was brought up, that is something that they'll look at in the spring and see how that is. But is that tied with the Battleground Protection District as just a text item? Is that something that will end up having another public hearing as a resident to fight and say, we need our buffer from the incompatible commercial to the residential? So that is a question. Is that something that would be a public hearing, or would it be something that the council or the planning commission could just vote on and allow that buffer to be eliminated? I guess I would like a little bit more information how, if the GDO2 is what is voted on and is accepted, what would exactly be the difference between maintaining the battlefield protection? The battlefield is a gem to the community, and everybody talks about it, and it is important. It is what the Chamber of Commerce prides himself on in being able to take people out on tours. It's very close development, right on the footstep of it. And the other part is, with the changes of the GDO2 and GDO1, right now, as we're speaking tonight, with Office General, we're talking 75 feet. If we come back in a year and somebody is proposing to change from Office General to a mixed use, then we're talking in the GDO1 to 150 feet. So as residents, we've gotten into the difference of 75 and 35 feet. 35 feet, I think, as a resident that can see that, it blends with the Chamber of Commerce 3-story building. I think that's a happy medium. But I just want the council to make sure that the decisions that are made in the next few weeks or months, that something can come back, and we cannot backtrack to where we are tonight. Somebody can come in and propose something different, and we're looking at different height restrictions there. So I hope that you have the information that's really clear to you to make a good choice decision, because it's been hard for me to keep up with. So I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you.
My name's Kevin Lindsay, live at 2595 West Park Drive. I agree with everything they're saying here. The 75-foot restriction, or going to 75-foot, would be, I think, detrimental. I know it would be detrimental to our house. As far as we live away, when we first moved there 9 years ago, the reason we bought the property was we had a secluded, nice backyard. After April the 10th, the tornado, we lost 16 trees on 3/4 of an acre lot. I've got a perfect view of a big high-rise hotel now out my back door, and I live quite a ways from there. So it's I know it's nothing to do with anybody else here, but that's my reason.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Miles Cumberbatch, 2824 Wilkinson Pike, which is directly in front of that GDO2 they're talking about moving. The height, it's right next to the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce is 40 feet with the bump up for the roof. So that's 40 feet, but you're saying the property right next door might go to 75 feet, which doesn't really sit well for us. As far as 75 feet, if there could be an office general building in front, which is 35 feet, if you're on the 6th or 7th floor, you'll be able to see well into the neighborhood. So it just, as far as where it goes, I understand that it might not go that way. The other thing is the change of zones, the battlefield protection zone and Wilkinson Pike buffer zone. I think the big thing what everyone's missing is the Wilkinson Pike has a setback, means that it has to be set back off the road. Now, when since the chamber lot's so small, you guys voted that they could build like 10 feet within the up to the road, so it's really close. Now, if the other two lots, OG, decided to keep it, symmetry, they'd also want to build right up on the road, which means you're going to have office buildings right up against a residential. You'll have a 3-lane road, yes, but they're going to be right there. And then, thinking of what's coming in the future, the Chamber of Commerce has 100 parking spots and 2 bus spots. So we know most of the traffic is going to be going down Wilkinson Pike and turn on Gresham Park. So it's in the future you have to play that this is coming. We understand. But 75 feet, if it's larger than the chamber, which is right next to the chamber, it might be questioned. The biggest thing is on how close you're going to build to the road. Is it still going to be a setback? Is it going to be a 70-foot setback, 100-foot setback, or is it going to be a 15-foot setback? Because that's how close you're going to be to residential. Residential is going to be right across the street, and then from the sidewalk, 15 feet, you're talking office general. And then another 100 feet, you're talking about a 75-foot building. The other point I have is, it's not really a point. Mr. Adelot mentioned keeping the area in symmetrics and beautified, and since it's right so close to the Chamber of Commerce, paraphrase. The only thing I wanted to mention about that is the developer who owns all this land also owns the land across the street. And as far as keeping it in the overlay districts and the gateway, it's all lovely, and it's going to look great. But how do you keep residential and commercial separate? You guys helped me out a year ago. You put in a big wall and some trees on the back of the Chamber of Commerce, which is going to help. If I rebuild on that lot, there's going to be some blockage from the parking lot at least. But if someone's able to build right next door, another building 10 feet off the road, where does that help me? My property value starts to drop. Thank you.
I'm Harold Ham, and I live at 2781 Highland Park Drive, and I wasn't going to get up except a comment that Mr. Young made a while ago about the property. It was brought up in the Planning Commission meeting that there was 3 ways that the city could take that property. That's why the people are scared. And number 1 is they could offer them a fair price. Number 2 is eminent domain. Number 3 is they could condemn it and take it. Now that's why the people are scared about the city taking the property. That was brought out in the Planning Commission. Number 2, I just want to ask, the blue area, is that 500 foot? It was proposed 230 feet, and it was changed to 500. Am I correct? Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak for or against?
My name is Pat Whitford, and I would like to speak against. I'm not really afraid of
Could
anyone
we have your
taking my
address,
property.
please? Your
Pardon me?
address?
I'm sorry, I live at 2633 Cross Park Drive.
Thank you.
My backyard backs up to the battlefield. As I walk out the front door, I see the high-rise. And I'm not really concerned about anyone condemning or taking my property. I'm really just concerned about the quality of life left for those of us who, hopefully, by the end of the year, my home will be paid for. I would like to raise grandchildren there, and I would like to take them to the battlefield and ride bikes with them just like I did with my daughter. And I don't see that a 75-foot building, I'm really concerned about the quality of life that you're going to provide for those of us who have paid our taxes and been here for 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
A new face. Excuse me. I'm Jim Barnes. I live at 2522 West Park Drive. I've lived there for almost 25 years now. And we all know how important it is to have controlled development with our city planning. With this in mind, I ask that you continue the battleground protection and the Wilson Pike buffer. It's through controlled development that you can maintain the beauty and the integrity of our neighborhood and the community. The impact of your decision will last for years, and in the future there will be many visitors coming from the new chamber down to the Stones River National Battlefield, and they'll see the wisdom in your decision if you will keep these things in mind. I'm asking you to consider this as I speak for myself, my neighbors, who like you are proud to call Murfreesboro home. Thank you.
I currently live at 2626 Cross Park Drive, which is the second to the last lot before you get to Crosswoods Drive. And
your name is
David Glass. Sorry.
Thank you.
And not because of the tornado damage, just because the Embassy Suite was built, we can see that from the back door of our house, which I'm not exactly sure which lot Embassy Suite is on down there, or if it's even on that map. But that can give you an idea. We can easily see 3/4 of Embassy Suite out our kitchen window. And so if you were to shift Embassy Suite to that lot that is being proposed to be CH, that's going to be able to be visible from the wooded area that the gentleman from the battlefield mentioned earlier that has been damaged for sure. I don't know if you would be able to see all the way through that from the trails, but you can easily see it from my house already. So that's one thing that I would like for the council to consider. Recently, we purchased the lot right there in the bend of Cross Park after the tornado, one of the homes that was damaged, and we're planning to rebuild a new home on that property. And the reason we did that is because of the battlefield protection in that area, and feeling like that would protect our investment and protect our neighborhood. And so I, too, would like to request that you deny the request that the battlefield protection portion be dropped. I do appreciate what the Planning Committee has done in not allowing or not recommending the CH. Instead they recommended the OG for the corner lot. I appreciate what they're trying to do there. And Mr. Alot's comments earlier regarding the area that was annexed, I think it's actually a great idea to have the controlled and not have all these signs of, insurance companies and all that like out on Highway 96. I think that's great. And so anything that you can do to help control is fine with me. as long as we're able to maintain that the principle behind the Battlefield Protection District. Oh, and one question. Are there any other areas that are in the Battlefield Protection District that has been changed into CH and the Battlefield, what's it called, Battlefield Protection District removed?
Anyone else wishing to speak? Superintendent?
Stuart Johnson, Superintendent of Stones River National Battlefield. I would just like to request that you not tinker with the Battlefield Overlay District. I understand the reasoning that the Gateway Overlay District is in some ways more restrictive. Nevertheless, I believe that the Battlefield Overlay District, that it's an important reminder that anyone who is doing any planning, requesting any rezoning, requesting anything in this area, that the battlefield is something that needs to be taken into account. So, if for no other reason, I think it's extremely important to maintain that district. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilman. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Bill Ketcher, and I live at 2510 Blanton's Point, which is on the corner of the southwest corner of Stones River National Battlefield. When I first moved to, at that time, Manston Pike, which is now Wilkinson Pike, we had the houses that were existent along the Van Cleve area. On past that, it was in the country. Dr. Corley lived there, the Bashams, and Mr. Lane. Matter of fact, the Blackman sign was down near Van Cleve. It says, "Welcome to Blackman." And Mr. Lane, being president of the Blackman Association at that time, thought I was a newcomer, so he moved it down in front of his house because the newcomers were coming. West Park didn't exist, and we were in the country. Back in 1992, 2 years after I was on the county, was elected to the county commission, I worked with, at that time, Mayor Joe Jackson to work in a triangular type agreement with Park Superintendent Mary Ann Peckham and Representative Congressman Bart Gordon, because we realized how important Stones River National Battlefield is to this community. It was a gem in the rough. We had many meetings at the battlefield over that period of time, working with the county commission, the city council then, and at Mayor Jackson's help, we were able to implement the battlefield overlay protection. I didn't know what that was at the time, but we soon found out that because of the buildings that we had and were starting to be developed along what is now Thompson Lane, we had county mayor, county executive at that time, we had the cattle sale barn. Right next to that, we built another metal building which was selling mobile homes. We knew that right after Thompson Lane was cut in, that was still in the county. But at some point in time, as growth continued, we wanted to put the overlay protection to where there were restrictions on heights. We wanted to make sure that we didn't have Elvis on black velvet on corner lots being sold and everything else. We thought that if we started requiring some protection, as it was at that time, it might help that development. I remember some of my colleagues on the county commission who owned property along that, belonged to one of my fellow commissioners I sat beside on the county commission, belonged to his father. That whole strip along Thompson Lane to what is now Old Fort Parkway belonged to his family, and resented the fact that we were trying to put, and I was kind of working with the city to put the battlefield overlay protection, because he felt it was his property, and he felt that he could sell it and put whatever he wanted to. If he wanted to put chicken coops on there, that should be his prerogative. And so the battle continued 150 years later, after the Civil War was fought there. But we knew at some point in time the city would grow out in that direction, and you see what type of structures we have, from the chop house now down the avenue with a lot of brick and stone structure, which is a very pleasant and eye-appealing to the citizens who come in and want to shop. As we turn left down onto Wilkinson Pike, at that time Manson Pike, we wanted to make sure that there was a buffer. And I believe, Stuart, there was, I don't know if the plans are still in place, but at one time there was a talk in the long-range projections of Stones River Battlefield of bringing a road off of Medical Center Parkway in the original planning, as currently being cut in right now, with the water lines being laid, to bring the main road into the battlefield. Because at that time, we had signs off the interstate, people going from Michigan to Florida, and they would get so lost and so confused trying to go to the battlefield because you had to turn off on Old Fort Parkway, and we had signs, and then it directed you down to Broad Street, and then you had to come across the railroad tracks down where the Chrysler and Jeep dealership is. They would get so confused they'd turn around and get back on the interstate and go on to Florida. But in those long-range plans for the battlefield, there was a proposed entrance to come in from the backside of the battlefield, to be cut in, to bring the visitors to that facility and to that battlefield off of Wilkinson Pike and bring it to the main visitor center. I'm not sure where that plan is. Probably it didn't proceed forward because of funding. Not saying that still can't occur. But the city has a great opportunity at this point, similar to what Franklin is doing with their battlefield. The governor has put me on the Sesquicentennial Committee, which, similar to our homecoming of '76, in about 2 years, this state's going to be celebrating with all the other states. Maps are going to be distributed at every visitor center coming into our state to celebrate 150 years of the Civil War. Civil War is very high on from a visitor standpoint and the economic dollars that it brings in. We knew that was coming back then, that at some point in time this 150-year celebration would be here. Now we have the chamber in a perfect place to direct visitors into a pleasant, eye-appealing. You know, when you try to think about history, you know, one thing my grandfather always told me, don't ever forget where you come from. And that's one thing that this community has, is something that we can remember our history. And by putting the right protections in place, and off of Wilkinson Pike, where we have residential, office, and then on over to commercial to Medical Center Parkway, was part of that historical overlay, trying to protect and give that sense of you have to get in the right frame of mind because of the encroachment of this battlefield. This battlefield is still listed as one of the most endangered battlefields in the country. But it's still high on visitation. People still want to come and see what conflicts that this country went through during that period of time. So I'm here to speak against increasing the height level on that CDO2. Speak against that. To leave in place the historical overlay that was put into place a number of years ago with the council's wishes at that time. And I think Mayor Jackson had the vision, along with several other leaders at that time back in the early 90s. That's been some 15 years ago. We knew if we did it right that not only history could be preserved, but business, I'm pro-business, always have been, business could continue to do well, and people don't mind shopping just like the Avenue. They like shopping in something that's very eye-appealing. But when you want to change that frame of mind and you want to go look at history, then by increasing that height, I think it would deter from that atmosphere. And as people start to leave the chamber and head down towards the battlefield, and maybe we can work towards bringing in an entrance on the backside of the park, I would support that 100%. But I think you've heard most of the people who have spoke here tonight do not live in the city. That side of Manson Pike, we're not city taxpayers. It hasn't been annexed. So this body can do what they wish. But as time moves forward and the next generation comes along, just asking you to think about that. The city will bring in just as much revenue, I think, if you put in the right appropriate buildings and leaving that height restriction. But it's the frame of mind, the view shed, if you will, as people leave the chamber and start to head towards the battlefield to get that experience of what this community has gone through, something we're very proud of. Not proud that the battle occurred, but we're proud that that is here in our community and it brings people in. So we don't forget where we came from, and I just urge you to think about that over your next 3 readings. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Councilman.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else?
My name's Tommy Smith. I live at 710 East Main Street in Murfreesboro. Going back several years ago, the city of Murfreesboro saw fit to create a new entrance into Murfreesboro. We now call that Medical Center Parkway. In doing that, they created the Gateway Overlay Development Program. And that was a very, very important thing that was done. When we got involved in the development of the area here, we chose to go under the GDO. And we have fortunately been able to develop a development that is at the very highest quality of not only here in Murfreesboro, but in the development community it's talking about in the southeast as being one of the very best areas of development around. To do what we are requesting, we feel like is very important for the entrance to Murfreesboro. We have kept the quality of this development through the bringing in the Avenue Shopping Center, by bringing in Mr. John Q. Hammonds with hotel, and we are looking forward to being able to do many of other very good quality developments as we go. Hopefully the banks will cooperate in the future. We look forward to creating and developing the rest of this as we have started. We would appreciate it very much so that we could move forward is that the zoning be approved by you as requested. Thank you.
Others wishing to speak? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time. And we'll consider on first reading an ordinance to rezone an area along Gresham Park Drive south of Wilkinson Pike as follows: approximately 10.3 acres to CH, approximately 5.54 acres to OG, approximately 2.95 acres to GDO1, and remove approximately 11.62 acres from the Battlefield Protection District. Ms. Taylor, could I ask you a question or two? Have we had an opportunity to change the Battlefield Protection District any time previously?
Yes, sir, we have. We've had a couple of buildings along the North Thompson Lane in the area north and south of the Medical Center Parkway that are in the GDO2 where they were wanting to develop hotels. And in order to be able to develop those hotels, they came through as planned developments, and in some cases they actually asked to amend that part of the height restriction out of their application. One of them being the Hampton Inn, another one being the Comfort Suites down there on the south side of the Medical Center Parkway. Another item being the project that's under construction across from or backing up to the hospital that the Swansons are developing. I guess that's called Gateway Center. And then the Crestview or Crestwood Suites adjacent to it that's currently under construction. Those have all had to have that provision of the BP changed because all those properties were in the BP overlay district, as well as the GDO2 district.
And this property that has labeled PCD on it, which I believe was a hotel at one time, possibly near expiration, but what was it a 3 or 4 or 5 story?
No, it was more like a 8-story, I believe. That was the Hyatt Plaza, and it had an underground garage underneath it. And they exceeded the 75 feet. Actually, they were only about 80 foot is what they were going to be. A very attractive hotel. I wish that one had moved forward because I think it would have been a landmark type structure in our GDO Gateway District.
It's what, 250 feet from the subject OG property or the GDO2 property that we're showing there?
Well, it's probably a little bit more than that. The right-of-way of Medical Center Parkway itself is 112 feet wide at that location. Probably more like 108 feet, Mike, but a little bit over 100 feet. So you see those lots there are probably in the order of 150 feet deep. So we're looking at 250 feet plus another right-of-way. So it's almost 300 feet from that. The closest part of the property zone, PCD, in the middle, is about 300 feet to the corner of the property that's labeled GDO2.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Mr. Young?
How deep is the blue from Wilkinson Pike back over to the kind of peachy goldish color straight down?
All right.
From there to there, yes, sir.
From the south right-of-way line of Wilkinson Pike to this line is 500 feet. Another line that I think someone asked about is how deep is the OG here. This OG is 230 feet from the south right-of-way line of Wilkinson Pike to this line right here is 230 feet.
Mr. Adlock, do we have anything that's on that, I can't see this that far, but I guess it's the north side. Do we have anything that's on that north side that's GDO2 right now?
On the north side of Wilkinson Pike?
GDO1. Where the subject property is on that side of Medical Center Parkway, do we have anything that's in GDO1 right now?
Yes, sir. Everything that's sort of this peachy color all over the map is GDO1.
But do we have anything that's on that side of the street that you could build a 75-foot structure?
Well, further to the south, down there around the curve at the south end of the avenues, some of that is already zoned commercial highway, a very small part of it. It's really just a little sliver. And that line dates back to a time before the construction of the Medical Center Parkway, and the lines were established in, when we built the road, we missed the line, I guess. I say that with humor because really the line and the alignment for the road were established on two different tracks and two different studies, and we don't build roads down zoning lines. We sometimes establish zoning lines down roads. So one of these days we'll probably need to go back and address that situation there.
I remember when I was on Planning Commission, whenever this came through, how many ever years ago, but what was the rationale of that BP overlay coinciding that with the development that we have there? What was sort of the rationale in doing that?
That predated the construction of the interchange at Wilkinson Pike and Metz Pike / I-24. That predated the new interchange. And we foresaw that the interchange was coming, and we were concerned very much that the Wilkinson Pike, as at that time existed as under the name of Manson Pike, a two-lane street with inadequate roadway characteristics, was simply not the type of road we wanted to see office or commercial of any kind developed along. And we were very much concerned that if we were to zone it commercial, premature to the improvement of the road, that we would have incompatible development for that road. That was just long and short. And we felt a very strong need to place a zoning along it, in that case RS-15, that would keep the development back from being more. Actually, RS-15 was the most restrictive zone, so it would hold everything back. And as abundance of caution, we felt that we'd put the BP overlay, because at that point, that was the road that had potential to be the entrance if the new interchange was constructed. We didn't place any of it on the north side of Wilkinson Pike at that time because we viewed the single-family residences as pretty much a given and was unlikely to see a change in that type of development. And it wasn't in the city.
Other questions?
Mayor, just to go over a couple of things that I heard asked, I made some careful notes, and if you want me to, I'll kind of go over them unless you all have something else in mind. Please. I made 7 notes. One of them is the Wilkinson Pike buffer still in place? And the answer is yes. The Wilkinson Pike buffer, as is currently drafted in the zone ordinance, is still in place. And the Planning Commission has recommended no change to it at this point. They have agreed to revisit it in March of 2010. In any event, any changes to it will require another public hearing, whether it be here before the City Council or maybe even 2 more public hearings if it goes back to the Planning Commission and with changes that require a public hearing. Height, how wide is the Wilkinson Pike buffer? The Wilkinson Pike buffer is 100 feet wide, measured from the south right-of-way line of Wilkinson Pike. And it extends from just to the west of the new chamber site all the way to Thompson Lane. The Wilkinson Pike, will it require another public hearing? I have answered that already. The blue is 500 feet wide, and are there any other areas? And I've already answered that one. So those were the things I heard asked.
Ms. McGannon, the 3 ways the city might acquire property is to offer a fair price and the agreement of the owner, eminent domain, which is in fact condemnation, or
it's condemnation by the city, or inverse condemnation if the landowner claims the city has taken it through building something on top of it, as opposed to eminent domain where the city initiates the take.
So those are the 3.
Or the suggestion was a third way would be to condemn it because property had fallen into disrepair. I think those were the 3. And I'm saying eminent domain is really sort of got 2 sides to it. So you could call it 3 or call it 4. I think I was not at that meeting. I think that would be accurate as a statement of the law, but I don't believe there was any statement made that there was any intent to exercise any one of those measures as to regards these properties.
Right. It's just an explanation of what a city somewhere, anywhere could do if they wished. And frankly, we do acquire property rights quite often for water, sewer lines, road, a lot of things. Greenways.
Mayor Bragg, may I offer one more thing to put this in perspective, and I don't want to extend this too long, but I think this is something that will help everybody to understand something. I was very much involved with the drafting of both the BP overlay regulations back in the early 90s as a very young planning director, and then as I had an opportunity to assist in a similar capacity with the drafting of the GDO regulations as a little bit older planning director. The regulations are very similar. We drafted, in fact, a lot of the verbiage in terms of the uses permitted are very similar. The BP overlay district, however, does not regulate building appearance. And when we hear references that the BP overlay has been successful to make the Thompson Lane corridor an attractive place in the medical center, that's really not the case in terms of the buildings. The appearance of the buildings that we are enjoying in the Medical Center Parkway area and along Thompson Lane, the new ones that look good, that we find very appealing, really are a result of the GDO regulations. The BP regulations really more regulated the uses permitted, because prior to the BP regulations, we did have a livestock yard, we had mobile home sales, we feared that there were going to be lumber sales. Not that there's a problem with lumber sales, but that we felt that was just the wrong place. The property was zoned industrial. We did want to regulate the itinerant vendors out, the Velvet Elvises, as Mr. Kitchen, Senator Ketchum mentioned. So we did regulate those out with the BP. But with the GDO, we used exactly verbatim the same language. And at a staff level, we even discussed recommending to the Planning Commission that we just do away with the BP regulations, because virtually everything covered in the BP regulations is also covered in the GDO regulations 1 or 2. And the difference between GDO 1 and 2 is GDO 1 allows a maximum height of 75 foot if you're in a commercial highway zone. GDO 1 allows maximum height of 75. GDO 2 limits it to 35 foot. And the GDO 2 areas were identical on the map in this area to the areas that was previously zoned and are currently zoned BP. So in my heart, I really believe, and in fact, anybody really examine the regulations will find every protection that the BP overlay regulations offer are also in GDO 2, without exception.
Any questions from Ms. Taylor? Any other questions, any comments from the council regarding this ordinance on first reading? I would like to thank everyone who has come, regardless of what the council determines to do. Many times we, as a council, deal with issues of sight and view sheds and things you can look at. Drainage is an issue that we get all the time. It's unfortunate in some ways that it's flat in Middle Tennessee, and we get a lot of it, and it's rocky. As many of you know, we have tried to limit the height of signs, because if you come across Thompson Lane and look toward the interstate, we have what we call sign farms, because there are signs growing out there. They seem to get taller every time we get near the interstate. So I understand many of you may remember and can hear each night the trains. We get 30 trains a day through the city of Murfreesboro, and you can hear them virtually all over town. I don't care where you are, you can hear those trains coming through. And I'm sure that was an early irritant to not only residents, but probably farmers and pigs and cows and horses and mules and everything else we used to have. So I just would like for you to know that the comments that you have brought in are the same kinds of things that we struggle with as a council all the time. And we try to at least listen and pay attention and treat everyone alike. And individually, we all own property somewhere. We live somewhere. We look out our window and see something. Sometimes it's a view that we've borrowed from the adjoining landowner, and that landowner wants to sell it, and we're not ready to give it back. But I do appreciate all of you who have been here and sat with us, and it's been our pleasure to be with you tonight and listen to you. Any other questions or comments on this ordinance on first reading? Vice Mayor.
I just want to make a few comments, and then I'll be willing to make a motion if no one else has any other comments. But I think there's been a lot of good things said tonight, a lot by the residents. And I know this neighborhood's been through a lot with the tornado and with the development itself out there. So they've had a lot of changes. It's a lot of people in Murfreesboro have. We're a fast-growing city. A lot of things that have changed, and they're not necessarily for the bad. But this particular area, I know Mr. Aylott had mentioned 3 different instances where we had actually changed this area. And those were actually up on Thompson Lane, where I felt like there was not that close to any residential properties, and this one's a little bit different in my mind from what those 3 were. And I'm not going to go back and give the history lesson that we've heard tonight, because I too was on the council back in the 80s when we actually put the battlefield protection overlay district in place, and a lot of different things. So I do think it's a good thing, and with the buffer that's there for the Wilkinson Pike buffer and all those things, they've been a good, if you will, a good buffer and a good partnership to kind of screen the neighborhoods that's there with the new development. It's been as mentioned earlier, we've been really fortunate here in Murfreesboro to have the new development and coincides with the history that we have with the battlefield and the neighborhoods. I would like to personally see this remain the way it is without changing that. I do think having a 75-foot building that close to those residential homes I wouldn't want that if I lived there. And seeing all the area that's around it that has the opportunity for taller buildings without changing this little spot. If we were looking and we were down to this little spot only, it may be different, but there's a lot of different areas out there that we can develop tall buildings on without developing on this particular spot itself. So if there's no other comments, I'd make a motion that this be denied.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions on the motion? The motion is to deny. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. All right. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Planning Commission to schedule public hearings to rezone approximately 1.12 acres located along Old Lascassas Highway, Rocky Lane, and Gunderson Avenue from RM16 to CL, amend Aurora Lake portion of Sunset Ridge PRD on approximately 6.96 acres located along Joe B. Jackson Parkway, rezone approximately 2.92 acres located along Veterans Parkway and Franklin Road from RS15 to CF, rezone approximately 6.78 acres located south of Highway 99 and west of St. Andrews Drive from a PCD to a CF, and you have copies attached. Mr. Adelot.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg. During this regular meeting on November 4th, the Plan Commission recommended all 4 of the items you just read and detailed to be approved, so we need to schedule them for public hearings.
Ms. McGannon.
December 17th.
All right, there is a recommendation for December 17th. Is there a motion from council?
So moved.
Second. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards. Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Mayor,
You had another item, Mr. Adelot.
Yes, sir. Honorable Mayor, members of the council, during this regular meeting on November 18th, that would be yesterday, the Plan Commission considered amendments to the zone ordinance regarding Section 34 of floodplain zoning. The amendments are requested by the Federal Emergency Management Agency and are for the purpose of updating the city's floodplain regulations to be consistent with the requirements of the flood insurance program. After discussion with the matter, the Planning Commission has scheduled a public hearing for the matter to be held on December 2nd. I would like to propose that you go ahead and schedule a public hearing on these sometime in early December after the Planning Commission's public hearing so that we can expedite the approval and adoption of this amendment to ordinance. I did drop you off what I call a tracked copy. You should have had laid out along with my letter. It's tracked so that you can see what the changes are proposed to be.
Ms. McGannon, can he do that?
Yes, and I hope you will too.
Yes.
I would suggest the 17th for that hearing because of the need and desire to get this done. Should the council meet prior to that time, we may well bring it to you for first reading before the public hearing. And so due to its length, it would certainly be helpful if you could keep the copy that he gave you tonight.
All right, there's a recommendation for December 17th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland. Mr. Washington. Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Ms. Stadlot. This time we'll consider recommendations of the Airport Commission with regards to a land lease agreement with ITT Corporation for the ADS-B facility. Welcome, Mr. Gerke.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Tonight, the Airport Commission is requesting your approval of a land lease agreement with ITT Corporation for a 25-foot by 25-foot area out in front of hangars 2 and 3 next to the parking area there. The land lease agreement with ITT Corporation is to install and maintain an ADS-B facility out at the airport. This is really the first step in many steps that we'll need future approval for to get that facility installed at the airport. And I've included quite a bit of information about what ADS-B is for you to explain what another acronym for you tonight.
Any questions for Mr. Gerke? Is there a motion that we accept his recommendation?
So moved.
Second. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Water and Sewer Board with regards to US 41 Florence Road Sanitary Sewer Special Assessment District revised. Schedule a public hearing to consider amendments to the Murfreesboro City Code, Chapter 33, Waters and Sewers, Section 33-207, dealing with the US 41 Florence Road Sanitary Sewer Assessment District, and consider for passage on first reading an ordinance amending Chapter 33, Water and Sewer, Section 33-207, dealing with the US 41 Florence Road Sanitary Sewer Assessment District. Mr. Gore.
Mayor Bragg, members of the council, good evening. Apologize for not having a nice drawing up here for you to look at, but if you would, this is something, it's a request for revising an existing special sanitary sewer assessment district. If you look at your first exhibit in your packet, the area outlined in purple is the existing US 41 Florence Road Special Assessment District. That assessment area was determined based on or anticipated serving properties fronting on Broad Street, basically from Overall Creek up through Florence Road. With the construction of the Public Works facility, there was actually a line that went under CSX Railroad and paralleled Florence Road, and now it currently does serve the Public Works facility. And that really opened up the area in blue that you have before you. So we haven't had any connections on this existing sewer along Broad Street because it's been it's $100 per front foot as it currently. So if you've got a very long and narrow property, say 200 or 300 feet long, that's a $20,000 or $30,000 assessment on top of standard connection fees. Basically, what we're talking about at this point is converting that to a per acre basis, which would, it opens up about, the line that was constructed opens up about 303 acres. And the revised special assessment would be on the per acre basis, currently recommended at $5,800 per acre. I can go through with you how we determined that number, but it's in the report in front of you. The Water and Sewer Board did approve this back in May of '08, and we brought it forward to them again in their September board meeting, and they recommend the revisions.
Any questions for Mr. Gore? Vice Mayor.
Mayor, I just want to commend Mr. Gore and Mr. Kirshner both. This, as he pointed out, this assessment district, no one had actually ever connected to it and used it because of, I think, of the cost of it. And this is a way that we can promote growth and redevelopment along that particular part of Broad Street as you go down toward our city limits, and also encourage people to use the sanitary sewer. A lot of them may even try to use the other methods. But it's a great way to promote growth, and it does a great job. And I do want to add that I do have a building lot that I own in this area that I don't think was in the past, so I now get to enjoy paying that. So I want to disclose that I do have a lot.
You could go ahead and pay in advance.
I might give you a discount.
A slight one.
I'm going to take a check tonight. On him?
Oh, you take a check? I'll pay for a lot.
Not from you, Mayor.
Mr. Gore, you've lost control of the...
But anyway, I do want to say that it's a good move in the right direction to help people redevelop and develop their property. So.
And with that being said...
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you very much.
Well, certainly you can, but the request is that you would schedule the public hearing. That's why it was item 8B. And my suggestion would be...
Yeah, thanks. Did you have a date you wanted to
Did you have a date in mind?
I really like December 17th.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Aye.
Aye. Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gelly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, I believe item C now, Ms. McGann is saying you can go ahead with that. She's giving you the go-ahead.
Right.
First reading.
You can pay your check.
You want that now? I move that we put it on first reading then.
Second.
Okay. I'm sorry, I wasn't watching it.
You haven't been on the council
She
very long.
I'm new.
He's new. All right, we have a motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gelly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Consider recommendations now of the Assistant City Attorney with regards to a proposed Second Amendment to the Road Development Agreement with Abundant Life Christian Center. Mr. Ives, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. At our last meeting, there was consideration of an amendment to this agreement. You'll recall that this is an agreement that has to do with the developers and landowners participating in the cost of rebuilding or actually newly constructing the Agri-Park Drive that goes all the way to the access road to 24, now down to Old Fort Parkway. The applicant here, or the developer here, is the Abundant Life Church, and they had two contiguous properties. They had a contract to sell a portion of one of the properties for business development reasons that don't have anything to do with the road agreement. They have now decided to move the transaction to the other tract of land. The financial terms of their business arrangement have not changed. They will still be selling approximately 3 acres to the same buyer for a medical office facility. What has changed, though, is that because of the differing acreages of the two tracts and the application of the formula that's contained in the road agreement, it's now necessary for them to ask us to defer payment of $96,000 that would be due on this transaction if we were starting with a clean page, rather than deferring $46,000, which we agreed to do, which council authorized us to do at the last meeting. We will still receive at the closing of this sale the same amount as before, $182,000. And the total remainder for the entirety of their obligation, the remaining balance, will be fully secured by a letter of credit. Staff believes that this is while we're maybe increasing the credit we're extending in one way to put it, nonetheless we remain fully secured, and it will assist this applicant or this developer in a transaction that will, I think, be of benefit to the city overall and will promote development out here along Agri Park Drive. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Ives?
Mayor, I think it's an appropriate request. With that, I would move that we adopt the recommendation.
Second.
All right, Vice Mayor, did you?
No, I'm good.
All right, you have a motion, second. Any questions? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gelly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Pass.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. This time we'll consider for adoption a resolution expressing the official intent to reimburse for certain expenditures incurred in connection with certain public works projects and related expenditures for the repairing, improving, and remodeling of the aquatic facilities at our sports com.
Mayor, members of council, this is a refunding resolution for the pool project at Sportscom. Your 2008 TML loan did include some funding for that project, but we realize that that project will cost more than was in the 2008 loan, and we're asking your approval to pass this refunding resolution so we can get repaid from a future bond issue.
All right, any questions for Mr. Lyons?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gelly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll hear from our Building and Codes Director with Assistant Director with regards to ordinance, and consider for passage on first reading an ordinance amending Chapter 15 Gas, Sections 15-10, 12, 19, 24, and 25 dealing with the Board of Gas Examiners, licensure of contractors, and pressure test certifications. Mr. Holtz, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Staff would like to recommend some changes to the Chapter 15 of the ordinance for the Board of Gas Examiners. Item number 1 would be to reduce the present board from 9 members down to 7 members. The next change would be to allow a state licensed contractor who is classified as MC-C, which is a mechanical contractor with a commercial subclassification, to obtain a City of Murfreesboro gas license without taking any test. The next change would be to allow a similar contractor with state licensing to obtain a gas permit without getting a city license, which is pretty much in accordance with state law. The last item is just to clarify that pressure test certifications will be approved by the director in the form they're submitted.
All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gelly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Thank you, Mr. Holtz. We're letting you off easy tonight.
Thank you.
Beer permit applications. Ms. Wright?
Mayor, we have one convenience store tonight in a new location at 2415 Halls Hill Pike, Suite A, and they have met all requirements for approval.
All right. Is there a motion we accept this beer permit application?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gelly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time you have before you a list of the statements to be considered for payment. Is there a motion we pay the bills?
So moved. Second.
Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gelly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider any other business from staff or the council to come before the council. Mr. Callow.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I come before you to ask your approval for another neighborhood stabilization program purchase. We were made aware yesterday that this property was available, and we had several of our nonprofits look at it, and they're kind of fighting over who's going to get it right now, but we think this would be an excellent addition to the program. 2715 Pepperdine Drive. The price would be $126,900, and we put a contract in early this morning, and it was accepted this afternoon, contingent upon your approval.
All right, council members, is there a question?
Move to approve the recommendation.
Second. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Any other business? This time I want to remind everyone of our replanting at the Thompson Lane Trailhead, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, or call the Parks and Recreation office to get a time to work, which will have 9 till noon tomorrow and 9 till noon and 1 to 4 on Saturday. The number is 893-2141. I'd like to wish the council and all our residents and those still viewing a happy Thanksgiving. We will not meet next week.
Mayor, I believe that this Saturday is MTSU's last home football game of the year.
It is. Exactly right. So get out and let's support the Blue Raiders.
Ms. McGanna's birthday.
Ms. McGanna's birthday, that's right. We'll not sing. You're adjourned.